Hi there and welcome to this lecture about ancient Egypt and the Bronze Age. My name is Marcus Henriksson and I'm a history teacher here in Sweden. During the Bronze Age we can also see the start of villages and cities, and they grew and increased rapidly during this time, especially at large rivers in the world such as the Indus River in India, the Nile in Egypt, the Euphrates and Tigris in Mesopotamia, Mekong and Huanghe in China, and so on. Why in these areas? Well, in these areas we can see more fertile land, it's easier to grow crops such as wheat and rice, it is also easier to ship goods, and fishing is also possible. The Nile is also known as the heart of Egypt. It both gave and took life. And even to this day it's an essential part for people who live in this region. It gave a tremendous abundance of, for example, wheat, which then led in fact to a larger and larger population. The area Egypt was already populated around the year 18,000 BC to 17,000 BC. We can see in Egypt, for example, the first stone calendar, the Nabta Plateau, from approximately 7,500 BC. But who was Egypt's first ruler or pharaoh? Well, it's either Narmer or Menes. We can't really know for sure. Historians assume that it's either one of these or that they are the same person. And he should have ruled in Egypt approximately 3100 BC to 3050 BC. And the evidence for this are this stone tablet, which you can see here in the picture. He is supposedly the one who united Lower and Higher Egypt into one country. And from that time the people in Egypt were taxed. So Egypt is known for having the first taxation system in the world. But the people didn't pay in money, they paid in wheat. Then we have the so-called Old Kingdom in Egypt, from 2686 BC to 2181 BC. But then we have the so-called Dark Period in Egypt's ancient history, from 2181 BC to 2134 BC. And during this time we can see large hunger in Egypt, famines, starvation, and so on. Then we have the so-called Middle Kingdom from 2134 BC to 1690 BC. During this time, Egypt grew as a country, conquered different territories, and you can see here in the picture how great Egypt had become. But then they were invaded by Hyksos, a group of people that originated from Palestine. And they succeeded in taking power in Egypt with the help of Nubia, a country that's based in the lower regions of Egypt today. Then we have the so-called New Kingdom period in ancient Egypt's history, from 1549 BC to 1069 BC. Egypt was then conquered by Libya. So how was Egypt governed during these periods? Well, it was a form of military and religious dictatorship. They were ruled by a pharaoh, and he was both king and god, or she. And the priests during this time had a tremendous power. So they were right let's say, under the pharaoh in power. And under them we have the military, whose task it was to maintain law and order. And at the bottom we find the peasants and slaves. The most famous pharaoh in Egypt's history and in the world are Tutankhamun. But he was not very powerful. He was only 19 years old when he died. So why did he die at only 18 or 19 years old? Well, it could be many problems caused by incest. We know for a fact that he had difficulty walking, a poor immune system, and so on. But it could also have been malaria, a fall accident, or he might in fact also have been murdered. So what made him so famous? Well, his gold mask. Unlike more powerful pharaohs, Tutankhamun's tomb had not been looted and destroyed. Here is an interesting theory. It could even be so that it wasn't even his own gold mask, but instead his mother's, and many historians now believe his mother to be Nefertiti. But who was Egypt's greatest pharaoh? Most historians would say probably Ramses II. He had over 100 sons, and he has often been regarded as one of the greatest pharaohs in Egypt's history. We can find him in the Old Testament in the Bible, as well as in the Quran. And he is also the one that is supposedly held Moses and the Jews captive. We also have Akhenaten, a great powerful pharaoh, and he tried to make himself the sole god in Egypt and abolish all the other gods. But this was not liked by the priests, so they killed him. The quality in Egypt was kind of good and relatively equal if you compare them to other civilizations during this time, like Mesopotamia. Basically, men and women performed the same chores. They also had the same access to commerce, nightlife, and so on. But there are some differences. For example, some jobs were reserved only for men, such as priests and warriors. But both men and women could rule Egypt, such as Nefertiti. She is famous today mainly because of her bust. I think it is in Germany these days, but some historians and archaeologists believe that is a fake or counterfeit. We also have Cleopatra, who lived between the years 69 to 30 BC, and she is often described as intelligent and very beautiful. However, her beauty may have been exaggerated. Most historians today believe that Julius Caesar married her not because of her beauty, but because of her intelligence. So what happened? First she had children, or a child, with Julius Caesar, and then used him to take power in Egypt. But when he was assassinated in Rome, she instead married Mark Antony in hope that he would help her retain her power in Egypt. We know for a fact that she wrote several books of her own. We knew that she knew a lot about language and philosophy. And we know that together with Mark Antony, they tried to conquer the entire Roman Empire, but failed against Augustus. So she then chose to take her own life. How? Well, according to the legend, Cleopatra took her own life by letting a snake bite her. But nobody really knows for sure. Most historians believe that she might instead have taken poison as a drink. Much more easy and convenient. We also have Hatshepsut, a powerful Egyptian pharaoh. And we know that the Egyptians worshipped different and several gods. They prayed to them, they gave them clothes on their statues, they sacrificed to them food, mummies, and so on. The priests were usually men. Women weren't allowed to be priests. We know also for a fact that they shaved their heads and they washed daily. The supreme god in Egypt was the sun god Ra. We also have Anubis, the protector of the graves of the dead, Osiris, the judge, Isis, goddess of nature, and here are some other important Egyptian deities and gods. Horus, god of war, Set, god of evil, Nun, goddess of the sea, and Tut, god of wisdom. Mummies played an important part in their religion, both human mummies and animals. Animals were usually sacrificed to the gods. But to create a mummy you need to remove the organs. The body was then embalmed and wrapped. Here are some pictures of animal mummies, and they were a really common offering to the gods. In Egypt you have found several thousand animal mummies. Cats, birds, dogs, goats, and so on. We also know that the Egyptian people built the Great Pyramids, such as the Giza Pyramid, which stands outside Cairo, their capital. The largest one of the Giza Pyramids is the Cheops Pyramid. It is a whopping 146 meters high, and it was probably built around the year 2500 or 2600 BC by the Pharaoh Cheops. And historians and archaeologists believe that it took about 20 to 30 years to build the pyramid, and that approximately 20,000 to 30,000 workers built it, and not slaves but ordinary citizens. How do we know that they weren't slaves? Well, we have found mass graves of the workers who lost their lives, and they received really good food such as fish, shellfish, meat, and so on, and they generally lived a long life. So during a certain time, people in Egypt were forced to work with building such things as pyramids, temples, statues, and so on, just like in the Inca Empire. But how were the pyramids built? Well, multiple vertical ramps perhaps? One big ramp to the top? We don't know. Some historians and archaeologists believe that the pyramids themselves doesn't consist of 2 million boulders at all, but is instead filled with small stones and gravel. That way you can build them a lot quicker. But how did they get the stones there in the first place? Well, quarries have been found, and we have also found a very advanced water system that went all the way to the pyramids. That way you could transport large stones a long way. But why pyramids? Well, just like the mummies, they are meant as a preparation for the pharaoh for a great afterlife. So the Egyptian people believed that if the pharaoh got a lot of treasure with them at the end, he could have that treasure in the afterlife, just like the Vikings, the Chinese emperors, and so on. So that's why they filled the tombs with a lot of wealth, gold coins, jewelry, and so on. Here are some conspiracy theories about the pyramids. Aliens, Atlantis, They're not tombs at all, but large electrical generators. But if they are, why haven't we found electrical equipment? Why didn't Egypt conquer all the nearby civilizations, if they were that powerful? Here are some famous places and cities in ancient Egypt: Valley of the Kings, Karnak, and Thebes. We know for a fact that the Egyptian people carried on a great trade system with different other countries. We know that they bought timber, ivory, gemstones, wild animals, tin and copper in order to make bronze, and that they sold grain, wheat, gold, papyrus, and glass. Here are some great discoveries and inventions of the ancient Egypt people. The world's first visual language, the hieroglyphs. The world's first tax system. It could be as early as 4250 BC. The paper or papyrus. It is at least 4500 years old. The first ships, that is boats with sails. An advanced medical system. We can see, for example, the world's first dentists. Perfume. A great export for the Egyptian people. Glass. If you take sand and you melt it down and add water, you have glass. But how and why did Egypt fall? Well, it never completely collapsed. But it never expanded and became a super empire like Rome or China, because they had really strong enemies. Take the Battle of Kadesh, for example. Egypt lost versus the Hittites. They were also defeated by the Mesopotamia, Assyria. They were also attacked by the Sea People. And we can see huge internal conflicts and struggles for power in Egypt, mostly between the pharaohs and the priests. They were then attacked again, Battle of Pelusium, Egypt versus Persia. Persia won. Then came the Romans, who also defeated the Egyptian people. And they were Rome's most important conquest. Egypt accounted for 1/3 of all the taxes and wheat. Then what? They became a part of the Roman Empire. Then they became a part of the Byzantium Empire. Then they became a part of the Muslim Empire. And then the Ottoman Empire. And then for a certain time they belonged to France and Great Britain. And during the 20th century they finally became independent again. So I hope that you during this short lecture have learned something new about Egypt's history. The sources I've used for this video are A History of World Societies by John P. McKay, World History New Perspective by Clyde Ponting, Perspective on History by Lars Hansson Örjan Nyström, History by Elisabeth Ivansson, Robert Sandberg and Matthias Turdaj, Lost Empires by Marcus Hutstein, Wikipedia, Ancient Egypt, Wikipedia, Cheops Pyramid, perfumesociety.org, nationalgeographic.com, and so on. I've also watched a bunch of documentaries: Ancient Egypt, a lecture on YouTube, The Year That Civilization Collapsed, History Secrets, Season 2, Episode 1, Cheops Pyramid, History Secrets, Season 2, Episode 3, Nefertiti's Bust, Egypt's Lost Queens, Ancient Egypt Documentary Timeline, Was Cleopatra one of history's biggest killers, Tutankhamun, the Boy King of Egypt, Immortal Egypt, yeah, blah 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 blah. You can pause the video and look yourself. There are plenty of documentaries. And here are some more. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And you can also email me if you like. I hope that you have a great day. Bye.